There. Today I'm here with Dan Vega. He is a Java champion, a Spring developer advocate, Java developer at Broadcom, and he's also the co-author of a book called Fundamentals of Software Engineering. I'm very excited to talk to you about the intricacies of software engineering. How's it going, Dan?
It's going good. We're here in the new year, so happy new year to everyone. As we were talking before the show, it's always a funny time of year. We have all these like new goals that we want to set, and we feel like, a fresh year, fresh start. We can kind of tackle everything. So I'm in that mode right now, just trying to like set up my year. But I'm excited to talk to you about this book, something that I was working on for a long time and was just released at the end of last year. So excited about that.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you too. Thank you. Yeah, speaking of goals, one of your big goals already has been accomplished. The book is published, right?
Yes, I've had many goals in my over my career, and I seem to be checking a lot of them off, which is a good thing. But I have to set new goals. But yeah, writing a book has always been a goal of mine. I have I've been writing a lot. So I started a blog back in like 2005. So I've been doing this a long time. And my idea with the blog was like, I enjoy writing. And when I came across something that I didn't understand and kind of tripped up on, I would write about it because, 2005, we didn't have everything we have today, like YouTube and
Yeah.
GitHub and all of the things where we can go research these things. So
We
I'd
had
write
Stack
about my,
Overflow though.
yeah, with Stack Overflow, we had everything. Um, but we have everything now. We didn't have as much of then. And so I would write about the things that I was interested in. So I've been writing forever. And my goal was always to write a book, but the timing kind of never worked out. I've also had some opportunities to write books in the past, but I've always known that I wanted my first book to be with O'Reilly. I consider O'Reilly kind of like the gold standard for technical
Yeah.
books. I love them. If you look on my bookshelf in the back, you could probably see a bunch of them. I'm an avid consumer of those books. So I wanted it to be with O'Reilly, and the timing ended up working out great with my co-author Nate, and things worked out. So I was really excited to dive into that. Little did I know how much work writing a book would be. I've heard it's a lot of work, but I
You
experienced
never
it
believe.
firsthand now.
Yeah. How long did it take to write it? The whole
People
process?
keep asking me this, and I need to like come up with a good answer, but I think around like 14 months, 15 months, somewhere in that range.
So over a
Um,
year.
yeah, and I'm half the author, right? So I can't even imagine reading this whole book by myself.
Yeah, it has like 400 pages or something.
Yeah, it's weird. On If you go on Amazon, it says the number of pages are 404, which if you're a developer, might make you laugh, right? Like this is not found. I think it's a little less than that, but I'll go with 404 because it's funny.
It's funny, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's actually, I mean, it's a pet book, like a animal book of
Yep.
O'Reilly, right? You
Yep.
have a fish. I
Yep.
know there are a lot of animal books. My first O'Reilly book was Pearl with the
Uh-huh.
camel.
Yep.
Um, but it's fundamentals of software engineering, so it's not tied to any particular technology or something.
Correct.
Is it fair to say that your whole career experience is condensed into that book?
Yeah, and I would say both of ours. So Nate's been doing this as long as I have. So if you add up all our years, it's probably 50 years of experience into 400 pages. So that was
For
a real challenge. Yeah, that was a real challenge, like trying to take everything and put it into this book without kind of getting over exhaustive on certain topics.
So I really like the subtitle of the book, that's reading from coder to engineer.
Yep.
So if we go in a little bit into the details of the book,
Yep.
what differentiates an engineer from a coder?
Yeah, so I think the premise behind the book is like we all get into this industry in different paths, right? All
Mhm.
of our paths are kind of different. And whether you went to like a 4-year college, whether you went to a 2-year technical school, a boot camp, whether you're self-taught, you were taught different things in those different scenarios,
Mhm.
right? So maybe in a 4-year like school, you were taught more like algorithms and theory and things like that.
Mhm.
In a boot camp, you were probably compressed into, a few months. So like, here's everything you need to know to get started on the job. And what we're trying to do is bridge the gap between that education and what you need to know on the job. So from our experience, like I remember being in that first role, being, scared. Do I belong here? Do I know everything I need to know? And so we're trying to kind of bridge that gap. Like, hey, if you're in the first couple years of your career, we know what you've learned in school. Here's some things we think you need to know when you're on the job. Now, that's also not to say that somebody with 5, 10 years of experience won't learn anything from the book, because I think there are certain things in there that you can kind of pick out and learn from. But that was really our motivation behind it. And so we picked out all of the things we think are important to know without getting exhaustive, right? Like we can't,
Mhm. Got it.
there's a chapter on automated testing. There are entire books and courses written on automated testing. We can't cover it all, but here's a high level overview of what we think you should know and what might kind of refresh some things you've learned in school. So that kind of was the motivation behind it. Like, hey, you've learned to like read and write code, but like now you're on the job, now you're in the workforce. Like, what are the things to kind of excel your career and things that'll help you out in those first couple roles?
So it's beyond like coding itself, beyond the source
Yeah,
code. It's
yeah, for
more,
sure.
more like the infrastructure around it and stuff like that.
Yeah. We kind of go into everything. I think a couple of the chapters we did, one was on reading code and one was on familiarizing yourself with unfamiliar code bases, right? And I
I
think
think
like,
that is a very important skill.
yeah, like we go to whatever, however we learned, right? Whether it was 4-year boot camp, self taught, the first things that we do are like learn how to write code. And if
Yeah.
you were to learn like another language, that's probably not the approach that you would take, right? Like you learn how to like read a language or understand a language first. And from a coding perspective, we read 10 times more code than we write. So the ability to understand code and get familiar with unfamiliar code and unfamiliar code bases that you're thrown into is probably more important than writing code, right? Because I don't know about you, but I've had anxiety in the past where I was like on a new job and I get thrown into this huge code base and everybody else on the team is already familiar with it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm not familiar with this. Like, where do I
Mhm.
start? Where do I begin? How can I begin to like be helpful here? And that has brought me the most anxiety in my career. So hopefully
Yeah,
some of the tips in the book will help with
absolutely.
that.
And I guess that's not only if you have a new job, that's also
Yeah.
like if you have a job and the code base is uh,
Dip.
so large that
Yeah.
even people working there for years haven't
Yeah.
seen any detail of it.
Right. Yeah, and
Uh,
I say like early on, but yeah, I remember 10 years into my career being thrown into a code base and it's just like, whew, there's a lot here. Like and documentation is not always up to date, tests are not always up to date. So like
of course
how do
not.
I get familiar with everything that's going on here so that I can be productive, right?
So, and what is your strategy on reading code?
Yeah, so there are some good tips in the reading code chapter. I ended up writing the kind of exploring unfamiliar code bases. And I gave some tips in there to like, okay, you can't just gung ho go like a boxer. You can't just run into the ring swinging right away, right? Like you have to
Yeah.
understand that like this is going to be a process. So yes, trying to figure out what is there already. So is there documentation that you can look at? Is there tests that you can look at? And what I would say is something that's very helpful. And I like to contribute to a team whenever I join a new team. One thing you can contribute right away is what is missing from the documentation.
Yeah.
And don't think that you don't have anything to offer there because you have a fresh perspective on this documentation that that have been there for 5, 10 years don't have, right? They just kind of know the system, so they don't really look at the documentation as much. You are looking at this from a fresh set of eyes. So if you're going through this and there's these onboarding docs and tests that are incomplete, this is your opportunity to kind of contribute to that right away. Like, hey, I didn't understand how to get application XYZ up and running because something was missing there. So I'd say, starting there, starting with the documentation, starting with the test, you can kind of contribute right away. The second is like, hey, we have to read code first. We have to understand some things. Don't go in there on day one trying to like tackle some PR, like some issue right away, right? What is the system? We have to understand that like there are features of this system. What is the overall intent of this entire system? So this might take reaching out to some product managers and reaching out to some other developers and understanding like the goals of this. And once you get to that, I think there are some ways that you can kind of navigate code bases. So I'm coming from a Java background. Like, what are the entry points to this application? There's
Mhm.
a main method. Is this like a REST API? There's probably endpoints that we can look at. I like to try to find the main entry points to the application.
Mhm.
From there, I can kind of like dig down some wormholes and find some things. But I
Yeah.
think there are some like tactics you can take to kind of navigate a new code base without trying to run in and start writing code right away.
Yeah, that is something that I find personally AI to be tremendously helpful with.
Yes.
Like finding those entry points, extracting those endpoints and stuff like that. That is something you just throw a question at your LLM, and
Yep.
it finds the right place where to look at. Is
It
that something you use as well?
Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned that in the book. And I think I use large language models more like for that reason alone than I do for writing code. Yeah, I wish I had that back in that job where I had that anxiety of like, what do I do next? Because if I use tools like Claude Code. If I can put Claude Code on a repo, I'm not asking it to write things. The first thing I'm saying is like, hey, let's explore this code base. Like, what are the dependencies of this code base? Are there missing edge cases in the test? What
Mhm.
is our test coverage? What is the architecture of this? How long has this been around? Are there any like major rewrites of the system? You could start to learn a lot without having to go ask people. I don't know about you, but even when I was in an office, it's like I'm gonna like try to figure this out. I hate asking people questions all the time, but now I feel like with large language models, I have like this pair programmer where it's like not only for writing code, it's for just like bouncing ideas off of and talking to someone.
Yeah,
And so yes, you can learn a ton about a code base with a large language model.
a very advanced rubber duck.
Yes.
Yeah,
The
uh,
rubber
uh,
ducks. Yep.
yeah. We did that pair programming in our company basically from day one. When someone joins, there's at least 1 or 2 days dedicated
Yep.
to have someone on your side looking at the code base. But
Hmm.
now you can easily extend it
Yeah.
by just using AI for day 3 and 4, and
Yeah.
people will learn a lot.
Yeah, and I think there's still a place for that pair programming, but now maybe you're not taking someone's like 3 days of their calendar up, right? Now maybe it's only a couple hours. You do a bunch of this pair programming with the large language model, write down all your questions, try to like what don't you understand about this? And then you can sit down with somebody on your team and say, here's where I am, what am I missing? And yeah, that I think part of the excitement for me with large language models is just kind of speeding up the productivity, right? Like
Yeah.
in that case, we are not taking someone's 3 days up. We're maybe only taking a couple hours up, and we're rapidly able to get caught up on the things that we're trying to get into.
Yeah. Another thing that I find challenging when it comes to onboarding new people is
Mm,
the tooling around it. Like, I mean,
yes.
probably nowadays everyone knows about Git, maybe not everything about Git, but at least some fundamentals. But there is so much more. There is dev containers, there is Yocto, there is CI/CD pipelines of different kinds
Mm,
and flavors.
yep.
How would you navigate this? And is
Yeah.
there a way to generalize it without being too tool specific?
Yeah, that's a great question because I often think about this. I remember when I came up as a developer, we didn't have all these like great tools at our disposal. And I often say I wish I had these tools at my disposal 25 years ago. But then I also pause and go, do I? Because there's so many more things to learn these days. and it was
Yeah.
much simpler to write code back then.
We
But
had
I
just
didn't
a
have
make file.
right. Like there wasn't as many things, but there was some simplicity to it. So yes, there is so many things to learn, and I think as a developer, you cannot. I think one of the things I've stressed in this book is once you get comfortable knowing that you can't learn everything, then things become a little bit easier, because I've always had this anxiety throughout
Yeah.
my career, like, somebody's talking about this thing on Twitter, I got to go learn that thing, right? And you just cannot learn everything. So, part of this is kind of defining your like career roadmap. Like, where do you want to be? And once you can do that, then you can start to sit down and go, okay, if I want to be here in 5 to 7 years, how do I get there? And how do I get there? Now I can start to define like what I need to learn. And so if I am, eh, I like to like, there's a phrase called the T-shaped developer,
Hmm.
where I'm going to focus on the fundamentals that I need to learn to get to that point. So for me, it would be Java, it would be Spring, it would be those kind of core fundamentals. But then the top of the T is like just knowing a little bit about some other things like DevOps. I'm not a DevOps engineer. I know a couple of things. I know enough to get things into production. I know what that looks like, but that's not my like core fundamentals
Not bread and
tendency.
butter.
Right. So I
Yeah.
think if you can kind of lay that out, then you can start to like focus in on some of the tools that you need to. For me as a backend developer, yes, Git is fundamental. Like I need to know that Git. Most people use GitHub or Bitbucket or something else. I need to understand those things. So I'd say as long as you can like stay focused on what you want to achieve in your career, I think it becomes much easier to like learn the things that you need to learn and not get caught up by all of the shiny new tools, because there are so many new tools these days and it's really hard to like kind of put those aside and say that's not on the plan right now, I'll get back to that at a later time.
Yeah, it's not only tools, it's also frameworks like the JavaScript world. There is a new
Yep.
framework every now and then,
Yep.
more than I can count. Same for, you mentioned DevOps. I mean, there is that CNCF landscape, which is,
Yep.
I can't fit it on my screen.
Right. Right.
Um,
Large
Things
language
like that.
models, there's a new greatest model every week and the benchmarks back it up, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, okay, but with large language models, at least you don't have to learn them in that detail as you would learn like a framework. You just
You
go and ask
don't.
them questions.
You don't, but I saw a tweet the other day from Andre Karpathy, who is like the one of the founding members of OpenAI. He worked at Tesla and X, and he had I'm just kind of like paraphrasing here, but he said, and he's a really, really smart guy. And he said, like, I've never felt more behind as a developer when it
Yeah,
comes to like a lot of these like tools in the AI space. And even if you get into something like Claude Code, there's skills and MCP and commands and custom commands. Like there's
now
so
we have
many
skills.
things out there. And it's
Yeah,
like, wow, like I'm told that all these AI tools are supposed to make me a 10, 20, 30 times more productive developer, but there's just like all these things out there, like where do I get started? And I agree with that. There's so much hype out there about all of these things, which I I think a lot of them are warranted. But if you have to kind of step back and just understand that like you cannot learn all of this, like,
yeah.
and the more that you can kind of grasp that, I think the better you'll be, and allow yourself to kind of focus on the tools that are relevant to you.
So let the FOMO just be FOMO, and
Yeah, and I say that, and I have the same FOMO. I see the posts on LinkedIn and Twitter and Blue Sky, and I'm like, oh, that looks so cool. I want to go learn it, but I have 20 things on my plate, so I have to say no to those things. So yeah,
yeah,
it's tough.
absolutely. There's also some chapters about soft skills in the book.
Yeah,
So what are good soft skills for
yeah,
coders
I
to
think
engineers?
yeah, that was an important part of this. It was funny when Nate and I were kind of talking about dividing up some of these chapters. He was like, "Well, why don't you tackle the career management one?" And I'm like, do I really want to do that?" It turns out it was one of my like most favorite chapters in the book. And like I said, I've been doing this a long time. And when I got started, I thought, like, okay, I'm going to learn how to code. I'm going to code some more and I'm going to keep coding until I get bored and then become a manager, right? Like, I
Mm,
didn't know what the career paths were that were available to me. I kind of figured them out as I went. And so one of the things I did in that chapter is kind of laid out, like, hey, if you want to write, the fundamentals of all of this is like writing and reading code, right? Like, you got to learn the foundation of this. But there are many exciting career paths here. Whether it's becoming an entrepreneur and writing code, whether it's getting into developer advocacy like I did, if you enjoy teaching, becoming an architect, becoming a senior developer, becoming some type of product manager. There are many paths in this career.
mm,
And so I wanted to stress, like, you have not signed up for 40 years of just writing code and pushing out issues every 2 weeks. Like, that's what we do when we get started, but there are other things that you can work towards. And so just knowing those things would have really helped me out early on. Once you know those things, how can I get to those goals? So I kind of laid out
mm,
some plans for, like, okay, if you wanted to be an architect in 7 years, let's work backwards from that goal. What are the things that I need to learn to get to that point? And I think a lot of that comes down to deliberate skill acquisition, which we just talked about.
yeah.
There are so many things pulling at your attention, and you got to be able to kind of push those off and say, hey, if I want to be an architect in 7 years, these are the things that I need to work towards. And so deliberate skill acquisition for me is a big one.
Okay, got it. So circling back to the initial question of what differentiates a coder from an engineer. So let's say you know how to write code. Now the next step is learn how to read code in larger code bases, understand the importance of automated testing, understand the importance of documentation, have all those soft skills at your disposal, and maybe have a little knowledge about the tools that are to the left and to the right. Um, so this, of course, is a journey. This is a
Mm-hmm.
spectrum. Where does AI fit into that? I mean,
Um,
in the way, will it replace a coder? Will it, or rather, will it replace an engineer, or where will it help, or where will it be more of a burden?
Yeah, so let me back up on that for 1 second and we'll get to the AI part. So for me, from coder to engineer, one of the things that I think about that I kind of look back on my career on is understanding the software development lifecycle. So we as software developers who have been in this industry understand that, like, we don't just get to a job and say, okay, let's write this new application, right? There is a whole life cycle of a product or a project that goes into play. And it's understanding, like, okay, I got to take requirements from the business. I need to turn those ideas into some PRD or some requirements. And you have to meet with people and really understand, like, what they're trying to build out of this, right? Again, there's a whole life cycle of this: taking the requirements, putting a plan together, writing code, working with a team, making sure that it's going to be ready for production. When we talk
Mm,
about going to production and scale and security, there's all of these things that you just don't think about when somebody talks about vibe coding something, right? Like, hey, I turned some language into an application. That's great. You took an idea and you made something out of it. But the idea of turning natural language into code and the systems that we work on in the enterprise, those things are worlds apart, right? And
yeah.
I don't think you understand that until you've been in this industry. And so I think from coder to engineer, coder is you have a passion for writing code, reading code, problem solving. I consider myself a problem solver. I think that's one of the biggest skills you can have as a coder or an engineer, right? You take that, once you move past those things and understand the entire kind of software development lifecycle, I
Mm,
think that's when you get into the realm of being an engineer. So where does AI fit into this? I've been on the train for the last year and a half saying, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see AI replacing developers at all. Like, I'm not scared about that at all. And there are a couple reasons for this. First off, you hear like a lot of people standing on the rooftops screaming these things like, oh, AI is going to be writing 95% of our code in 6 months. You got to remember who is saying these things. This was Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, which was like 9 months ago, and that has not come to fruition. It's because they have a vested interest in this, right? When you hear CEOs saying they want to replace 50% of their workforce with AI, right? They want to do that because they are going to kind of bring down their operating costs, right? So just remember when people are saying these things, who is saying them. I think the other crowd that is saying them is kind of the vibe coding crowd. And I want to talk about that for a second as well. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, had a really good quote, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he said, what AI does, frankly, is lower the floor and raise the ceiling. So we lower the floor for barrier to entry, right? We can get people who have ideas, who don't know how to code, and produce something. And I think that's great. I am not a gatekeeper of that at all. But what it also does is raise the ceiling for anyone who has experience with writing code, reading code. And I think you get more productive if you know the things that you're supposed to know, you know the trade-offs, you know architecture, you know how to get things into production, right? And so I really like that. And I think that, towards the end of last year, we did see like, it was a weird year as far as like layoffs go. I think that's going to kind of correct in 2026. And I think as a software developer, we're only going to be more in demand because now, I don't know about you, but, companies I've worked at in the past, we've not had enough quality engineers to build the things that we've been asked to build.
Yeah.
And now we have tools to kind of do that and actually build the things we're asked to build, and we can take on more things, which is really good. And on that note, one of the funny things that I always hear is like, oh, all these SaaS companies are going to go out of business because we can just vibe code these things. And I'm like, have you ever worked in an enterprise? Because, we don't have enough engineers to work on the products that we have. And we're just going to start like vibe coding CRMs and financial applications on the weekend because we can. Like, that's not going to happen. So I think a lot of where you hear that from is the crowd that has not been in an industry for 20 years. So none of that scares me.
Yeah. The way I look at it is more like well, maybe 90% of the code is already kind of AI generated. Not in today's AI, but
Yeah.
90% of assembler code is just automatically generated. That's
Right.
what we call a compiler, right?
Right.
So that didn't hinder the growth of software engineering at all. Same for AI. We have all these tools. We have this FOMO of not knowing them, but with AI,
Yeah.
we can just use them
Yeah.
for most of the parts. And then, as you said, you can dig deeper and build the lower part of the T-shaped
Yep.
skill set.
Yep.
So I'm not scared at all, neither.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way ahead. And also, you mentioned AI reading code, but it's also true for using those tools, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think coming back to the software development lifecycle, if I'm not on a large organization, enterprise team anymore writing code, but if I was, what I would say is I don't care if you wrote this code or the machine wrote this code. But part of the process of enterprise development is we have code reviews. And when you come to this code review, I'm going to ask you questions about this code, whether you wrote it or not. And you better be able to answer that. Why did you make this decision here? Like, again, don't care if you wrote it or not, but a decision was made to write code a certain way or implement something or use a certain architecture. Why was that done? And if you can't explain that, then that's the problem. We can't just allow AI to write all of this code and push it into production without understanding it.
Yeah,
If we
absolutely.
did, we would be hiring 10 million more developers because there would be so many more problems out there, right? So as long as we have these checks and balances in place, which again, somebody hacking on something on a weekend, they don't have that, right? We have that in the enterprise. We have these checks and balances. We have teams that can do code reviews and make sure that we understand what we are writing, whether we are writing it or not, that is going into production is going into production for the right reasons.
Yeah. Um, Let me quickly circle back to what you meant with correction in
Mhm.
2026 that we might see. So this is like a question regarding the future that might be hard to answer, but
Yeah.
we have seen a lot of stuff going on in the industry as a whole,
Yep.
starting from, I don't know, the last couple of years were like
Yep.
ups and downs all the time, and now
Yep.
we have so many influences. What's your projection for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I don't have any data to back this up. This is just kind of a feel. And for me, like talking to people, networking in the communities, when COVID came, we overhired. Everybody was at home. We overhired engineers because it was easier to hire people and onboard them from home, right? And then after COVID, we kind of made a correction and layoffs happened and we kind of downsized some of the workforce. Then this idea of AI came into place and like, okay, well, we don't need as many junior developers or we don't need as many developers in total, right? And I think we saw a lot of that last year. Towards the end of last year, I think people are starting to realize what some of us have been saying is like you're not going to replace 50% of your developers with some of these tools. You are going to be more productive, but if you let people just use these tools and push all of this kind of slop into production, you're going to have more issues. I saw an article from Salesforce it was either last week or 2 weeks ago that said, we made a mistake. Like they laid off a bunch of developers. They're going to rehire developers again. And I think that's where this year, I don't know that it's going to be a huge explosion this year, but I think a lot of the layoffs we saw last year, I'm hoping to see a correction in that this year. Because every time I go on LinkedIn and I see some companies laying off 5% of their workforce and a lot of them are engineers, I just get sick to my stomach. So I guess it's
Yeah.
it's it's what I'm hearing and a little bit of hope too for my engineer friends.
Yeah, I hope the same thing actually. I believe probably those roles are gone, like those 5% layoffs, but there's room for new ones, right? Because
Yeah, right.
um, I like the quote that you had from the CEO of Microsoft. It lowers it raises the ceiling, and
Yes.
probably that's what happens.
Yep.
Probably we'll see a lot more startups. We people are just able to put their ideas into prototypes and work it from
Yeah.
there. Um, yeah, we will
E-
see.
Even somebody with more experience. So what I think really excites me is like I use it for the things that I build, which I have deep knowledge in, whether it's Java or Spring. Like I'm more productive in those areas. Now, I am vested in the iOS community. I have an iPhone, I have a MacBook, I have
Yeah,
all the iOS things. I've never written an iOS application, but I'm 100% confident that if I wanted to sit down in the next week or two and get something, write an iOS app and get it published, barring the gatekeeping of the iOS store,
yeah,
that I could get something out there because I understand like the fundamentals. Like I could build iOS apps, I could build something in Python. Like there's no barrier anymore. Like I could have done that 10 years ago, but it would have taken me a lot longer than it would today.
yeah, absolutely. So that was a bit of hope. So if there are people which still have some hope left for just entering the field,
Mhm.
apart from buying the book, obviously, what would be your best recommendation for someone going on that journey from coder to engineer?
Yeah, I think try not to fall into the trap that is AI these days. Like, yes, I can go ask it to build something, but let's learn some of the fundamentals. So a lot of the fundamentals are in the book. I mentioned problem solving. Problem solving is like a core skill for me that not a lot of people teach, and there really isn't a bunch of techniques or frameworks for doing so. It's really about building things and failing and learning from those failures. That's how I learned. I would build
Hands on.
something hands on, write it. It didn't work. Oh my gosh. Again, 20 years ago, I didn't have the resources we have today. So I'd scour the internet for some random article on the edge of the internet. Oh, that's what I did wrong. Right. And when you get that aha moment, you won't make that mistake the next time. And you start compounding those things and learning the fundamentals. And that's how you can become a really good developer. And I think that is lost when you just ask AI to do something and accept it. Use it as a tool. Maybe try it yourself first and then ask AI, hey, I'm trying to like write this function, I'm stuck, and see it do it, but then write it yourself as well. Because the mechanics of writing that code, of learning from that failure, that's really what's going to help you along your career. And I can promise you, if all you do is write prompts and click accept and not understand these things, then you won't have a career in this industry.
You
And
won't learn.
that's
You
where I
won't
see
have a
it.
career. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. That was a lot of insights. Thank you for that.
No problem.
If people, so we definitely link the book in the show notes, but if
Yep.
people want to continue that conversation and that discussion, what are good ways to reach out to you?
Yeah, a couple ways. Fundamentals of SWE for softwareengineer.com. There is a website for the book. We also have started a podcast. We're a few episodes in, so if you want to learn more there, you can. And if you want to find out more about me, danvega.dev.
Perfect. So people reach out on Twitter, email, LinkedIn.
Yeah,
What's your
yeah.
preferred way?
If you go to danvega.dev, all my socials are there. LinkedIn, Twitter, Blue Sky, YouTube, all of the places are there, so you can find me there.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. Have a nice
All right.
day.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.